Welcome to Lessons in Lojban. In this lesson, the basic structure of the Lojban sentence will be introduced. Before we introduce the Lojban sentence, let us shortly discuss the actual business of language itself. When we speak to each other, there are generally a few main types of utterances that we vocalize, such as statements, questions, and commands. In this video, we will be talking about statements. Questions and commands will be covered in a later video. The statement performs one of the most essential functions of language and communication, describing how things are related to each other. I see the apple. The apple is red. I think apples taste good. When we make a statement, we are essentially making a claim of truth. We make these claims of truth about objects in the world, ideas in our head, or entirely abstract concepts. When we take these objects and ideas that we talk about and we make claims about them, we call that a proposition. We are saying, hey, this fact is true about this object. That is the essence, a statement that proposes some truth. The objects in our propositions are called the arguments. Predicates, on the other hand, refer to the specific truth that we are claiming about those arguments. When we claim a propositional statement such as, the apple is red, we are proposing that our object, the apple, has some sort of relationship with redness, that its skin is that color. That specific quality that we claim for the apple, its redness, is provided for by the predicate is red. The predicate is red can take any argument and insert such a redness onto it. Compare that to the apple is green. This is also a propositional statement about the same argument. However, the predicate in this statement relates the apple to greenness. By changing the predicate, we have altered the claim that the statement proposes to be true about our object. Furthermore, if we instead change the argument, you can see that nevertheless the predicate is green does its job of asserting greenness about the argument, in this case a frog. In Lojban, the Bridi is the structure that holds the propositions that we express. Here we can see the standard form. All of the Lojban sentences used as examples in this lesson will have the same structure as the standard form. There are essentially two parts of the Bridi. In blue, we can see the 5 argument places. These places, or slots, are where we can put the subjects and objects of our predicate statements, such as houses, cars, friendships, and ideas, anything that we wish to talk about. On the other hand, right after the first object, in red, we have a spot for the word that defines the relationship that our objects share. These two features of the Bridi allow it to perform its function of holding our propositions by bringing together one or more arguments and binding them or relating them to each other with some specific relationship or predicate. In Lojban, the relationship term is called the selbri. The arguments are called the sumpti. Generally, you will see the sumpti places labeled x1 through x5. The entire term taken as a whole is the Bridi. Let's take a closer look at both the selbri and the sumpti to see if we can formulate our first Lojban sentences. After we investigate the selbri, or predicate words, we will return to cover the sumpti, or arguments, more in depth. However, to make our discussion of the selbri more interesting, let us first introduce a couple simple sumpti. These are single words that represent objects relevant to the conversation, akin to pronouns in English. The prosumpti are me, or me the speaker, do, or you the listener, and ti, this here. With these 3 pro-sumpti, we can now refer to ourselves, our listener, and some unspecified object that both we and our listener can see. As has been mentioned, the syllabi are the mechanism for relating the various sumpti together in some sort of statement. In order to better illustrate our explanations, we will keep the main Bridi form in view here at the bottom. If we imagine that the standard Bridi form is a stage, we can also imagine that the syllabi acts as a sort of director of a play for which the sumpti play as actors. Let's get the sumpti that we just learned upon the stage. The syllabi's job as a director, then, is to tell the listener what role each of the sumpti play in this statement. Each syllabi word has a definition, or place structure, that defines the roles of the Bridi. As an example, let's use dunda. The place structure for dunda is X1 gives item X2 to recipient X3. This definition, or place structure, tells us exactly what each of the sumpti in our Bridi are doing. If we label each sumpti with its corresponding role from dunda's place structure, we can gain a very clear idea of what this statement proposes. If each Bridi tells a story, then dunda always tells the story of some giver who relinquishes some thing to some secondary recipient. We then use sumpti to fill in the roles with the actual objects we want to talk about. In this case, we can see that the giver in this story is me, the speaker. The item being given is ti, this thing here that we can see. And finally, the receiver of the item is do, the listener. From this we understand the precise message. We have used the syllabi to interpret how the sumpti are related to each other in order to understand the predicate of this proposition. The English translation of mi dunda ti do could be written as I give this to you. By changing the position of the sumpti, we can change the predication created in the Bridi in order to communicate a different message. If we switch the positions of mi and do, the speaker and the listener change roles in this story, and so the message also changes. Do dunda ti mi could be written as you give this to me. In both sentences, dunda casts the roles, but we have switched the actors. We can also change the syllabi. Let's use a different but very similar syllabi called Vishnu. The place structure of Vishnu is X1 sells goods X2 to buyer X3 for price X4. Vishnu tells a similar story, but in this case a purchase takes place instead of a donation, and with an associated price that now occupies the fourth sumpti place. The new predicate alters the proposition, and now our arguments assume their new roles. Giver changing to seller, item changing to goods, and receiver changing to buyer. And of course the X4 could take some dollar amount. In our case, where the fourth sumpti has been omitted, the sentence remains grammatical. This information, the price, is simply not provided to the listener. The English translation of this Lojban Bridi might read, you sell this to me. Of course, if we again reverse the positions of the sumpti, mi and do switch roles, and the translation changes to, I sell this to you. Regardless of the specific sumpti that appear in the Bridi, the syllabi is always the blueprint for the proposition. The sumpti assume the roles as assigned by the syllabi predicate, and the result is the message communicated by the Bridi. Now we will return to talk about the arguments to our celebrity more closely. The prosumpti we know, mi, do, and ti, don't exactly cover all of the things that we might want to talk about. However, for completeness, we should mention that there are two other prosumpti that accompany ti. Where ti means this here, ta means that there. And tu could be interpreted to mean that yonder. All three refer to some object that the speaker is looking or pointing at. The difference between them essentially boils down to a subjective notion of proximity of the object to the speaker, similar to their English counterparts. We have just learned how, equipped with a celebrity, we can arrange the prosumpti in the Bridi in order to project roles like giver and buyer onto them in order to talk about the speaker and listener in this way. But one may wonder at this point, how do we talk about givers and buyers themselves? Recall the place structure of Vishnu. Most Lojban novices will be tempted to remember Vishnu's English equivalent to be seller, and this is how they will remember its meaning. However, it is apparent by its place structure that this single predicate contains four related yet entirely distinct concepts within it: sellers, goods, buyers, and price. So the task is then to somehow capture the distinct concepts held within this single celebrity. To accomplish this, Lojban utilizes two words that surround the celebrity term, lo and ku. When we enclose a celebrity term with lo and ku, we instead form a sumpti term. We go from having a predicate with a place structure and several distinct concepts to representing a single object, or sumpti. This kind of sumpti is called a description. When we do this to Vishnu, we create a sumpti term from its x1 place, which is the seller. This works on any celebrity. If we bring back Dunda, whose place structure is x1 gives item x2 to receiver x3, Loku will capture the x1, and we get a sumpti term that refers to the giver or donor of some sort. We can now use these lo descriptions as arguments in any Bridi we wish. Let's start with the celebrity Pendo. Its place structure is x1 is a friend of x2. Starting with Pendo as our Bridi celebrity, we now have the choice of what to put into each sumpti place. Let us attempt to say, the seller is a friend of the giver. We'll start Pendo in the middle and build our sumpti around it. To begin, we open the sumpti term with lo. Lo always consumes celebrity terms, and we have already decided to use Vishnu so that we can describe x1, the friend, as being a seller. We then use ku to finish the sumpti term, and our x1 is complete. At this point, the Bridi simply says, the seller is a friend. But who are they a friend of? To specify the befriended, we follow the same process. Open the sumpti term with lo, specify the celebrity term we want the x1 of, then close the new sumpti term with ku. Our Bridi is complete, and we can see how Pendo and our two description sumpti correspond to the standard Bridi form. Lo Vishnu ku, Pendo lo Dunda ku. The seller is a friend of the giver. By using different celebrity as the predicate of our Bridi, but also as the source of our description sumpti, we can express a very large range of statements in Lojban already. Just like before, we can change out the main celebrity predicate and change how the different sumpti arguments are related to each other. How about Tavla? x1 talks to x2 about x3 in language x4. Can you guess how Tavla changes the meaning of the Bridi? What might the English translation say? If you guess something similar to the seller talks to the giver, then great. The thing to notice is that, regardless of what celebrity we use, the structure of the Lojban remains the same. If we can firmly grasp how the Selbri and Sumti work together to build a Bridi proposition, it becomes apparent just how straightforward this system helps us accomplish the task of communication, to impart to our listeners some description of how certain things relate to each other. To emphasize this point and to test our understanding, let us scramble the Selbri within the Bridi and try to guess the meaning of the new sentences. Lo dundaku, pendo, lo veshnuku. The giver is a friend of the seller. Lo pendoku, tavla, lo dundaku. The friend talks to the giver. Lo tavlaku, dundati, lo veshnuku. The talker gives this to the seller. Lo dundaku, veshnu ta, lo veshnuku. The giver sells that to the seller. And with that we conclude Lesson 1. Shoho!